How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Toddcast Cleveland. This is James Barney.
And my name is Zack Wolfe.
And today we're going to do another interviews reflection episode. We enjoy doing these. I hope you enjoy checking them out. The first one we're going to do is from 1995. You can find these on YouTube. Ironically, they're both loaded by the same YouTuber named The Classic Sports. But the first one's from 1995. It's called Todd Rundgren Discusses Virtual Reality. These are my favorite eras of Todd interviews for sure, because he's really talking about people are giving him a platform to talk about the expansion of the music format and how we produce music and things like that. So, and this one it's a quickie. It shows clips of the No World Order set, the Todd Pod, as you were.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes in and talks about lugging around all that gear. Also talks about how it adds the interactivity of the event that he was trying to put on by not having a set list, which as an artist was one of my favorite things to do too. Just kind of see how the people are feeling.
Mm-hmm.
He also talks about, a condensed version of what he was going for during the No World Order shows. And if you don't know anything about the No World Order shows, he had this big, essentially like a rocket ship with all kinds of hardware and gear and guitars, and performed. And there was also all kinds of interactive things for the audience to do, such as control the cameras and the lights on the Todd Pod. My parents went to that show. They said that there was all kinds of like lights that would allow people to like bang on the drums in front of the rocket and stuff like that. And so it was a very cool thing that he set up. I don't really know of many other people who have done anything similar to that.
Yeah, I think that's Todd. I don't think that's
a Todd classic thing, yeah, for sure.
Like what you said before is like this is a very interesting period for Todd because of all of the expansions of video and interactive and all the internet and all that, and he's just loving it. You know, he there's so many Todd interviews on the web from all areas of his career, and I think these ones particular, he's still Todd and kind of like sarcastic and kind of like his Toddisms, I guess you can't really yeah. but you can tell he's genuinely like really excited about what's going right on in his career right now. With all these with the VR and the computers and the interactive thing. I think he really likes the whole idea of he wants it to be more than just an album.
Absolutely. Well, I think that the early 90s, and we talk about this a little bit more in another interview, and I'm sure ones in the past and probably will continue to do. But I think the 90s was really important for him because he's always been trying to reinvent himself as the artist. And I think that this was another milestone for himself as an artist. And I hope that others would agree, was the whole interactive thing. So, again, the video is called Todd Rundgren Discusses Virtual Reality. His interactive world, the virtual world. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Well, I think what happened is that he was more interested in the computer world than the music world. Which he still loved music, but like that meshing was like his like outlet at this time in his career. He had a mystery school that he created on a website called walkindreams.com, and I checked, it still does not exist. Can't go on it. And it was called Alexar. I think that's what its name was. And it was like an immersive like school where you could go there and chat and like share your craft. He doesn't really say what the crafts are, but they in the video, him and the interviewer, there's like a little TV in the back and it's showing the world. It looks like a video game. And the cool thing is this is 1995, and if you go into the video game world, there was no video games that looked like that.
No, not like now where people have like VR chat and stuff like that. And then technically what people are doing right now with like Zoom with that's what schools are doing for virtual classes. It's kind of similar to that, but this is more like a VR world.
Yeah, it doesn't really show if you have like an avatar or anything. It just shows the world, and it looks like PlayStation 2 graphics.
Barely, yeah.
Yeah, and it's back in 95. I mean, that's before N64 came out and all that. Everything was at the most 32-bit, and it was most of it was side scrolling or polygons, and seeing that was like, wow, another box to check to saying that Todd is way ahead of his time.
Absolutely.
That's why this interview is really important. And this is the only time I think you can find footage of that world that he created on this computer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've never seen pictures or anything. They might be out there, but I've never seen them personally.
Yeah. But yeah, this was a quick, cool little interview.
Another thing I wanted to add about this interview that we didn't discuss is that it talks about there's a lot of Todd Rundgren websites that were coming out at this time.
Yeah.
And they were like fan club, just people getting on having
love kind of stuff.
And I think like in the early 90s when like computers were starting to become things, I think there was a lot of forums and blogs, I guess if they called them at that point, of just people connecting, talking about anything from television to music to cartoons to comic books to things that people obsess over or have a passion for.
It really helped the niche hobbyist, these early internet chat rooms and stuff like that.
Yeah, and he likes that, and he seemed like he liked that people were doing this. He didn't like putting out a fan club and having publicity and all that. So he doesn't like publicity, and he's pretty well, at least in this era, is very adamant, saying like, I don't want to be publicized at all. I'm an artist. That's all. If you like what I do, you do. That's it.
And I think that's how they wrap up the interview, is talking about that.
Cool.
So yeah, I don't know. How long do you know how long TR Connect has been around? Because the website looks like it's been around for a very long time. I'm sure that's what he's referring to. Because they
show some of them on there.
Oh yeah, that's right, they did. Yeah,
but I didn't see that on there. I'm not sure how long TR Connection's been around, but got to give a shout out though. I remember being pretty young and like going on there and finding stuff, being like, oh my god, look at this site, it's all this information about Todd, like all the pictures, and it's still active now. It's a great site. Yeah. So if anybody that's listening hasn't been on it, and if you're a fan of Todd,
I think it's been around for a while, because like I am obsessed with time, and so I would go back and look at the TR Connection and see a random date in 1997 that Todd would play, and just look at the set list and go, haha, cool, because people started going to his shows or following him around and recording all the set lists and reporting it to the TR Connection and go, Todd played this last night. I can't believe he played that. And then he played that new song from that new album, The Individualist. So I think that's what he was referring to, was sites like that.
Yeah.
Which is great.
That's the only
labor of love hobbyists,
That's the only one I can really think of that's like a highly dedicated Rundgren website. If there's any that you guys know about, let us know. Let's go on to the next interview. So this one is like a couple years before. This is from August 25th, 1991. It's a lot longer. It's about 30 minutes long, but it's well worth a listen. It's before a show in Indianapolis during the second Wind Tour, and Todd was interviewed by a guy named Ken Owen. I picked this one because me and James were talking about doing another interviews episode, so I just typed in Todd interviews on YouTube, and I was scrolling through and I saw the thumbnail, and I was like, oh, I don't think I've ever watched this one before. So I was like, let's do something completely new. It was fun because there was a Cincinnati reference in there, and
that's where I'm from. If you shout out Cincinnati, shout out.
And it was the day after the Cincinnati show. And Todd is sitting there talking to Ken, and he's got one of these like streamer sticks. It's like a stick, like a pencil with like a streamer on it, and like when you fling it, it like shoots out and comes back to kind of like a yo-yo kind of thing. And like the whole interview, he's just like kind of sitting there like playing with it, and I was like, that's funny. Classic, early 90s Todd with the oval glasses, one's vertical, one's horizontal.
And if anybody knows where we can find those, like a pair of those sunglasses, please hit us up. We need 2 pairs.
Yes.
Just throwing that out there. Zach and I, since he and I became friends, have been talking about how we can get these. So we see that they're out there. If anybody's got 2 pairs, please, we would love them. Zach's got a big head.
Yeah, I need a bigger pair. Yeah. So he's wearing the glasses. He's got his like classic baggy T-shirt look, and they just kind of talk about a lot of different things. A lot of it's about where he's at in his career right now. So one of the first things he talks about is he likes to go away from the music business. He thinks going away from it's proactive as him as an artist, which I agree with that because by watching a lot of Todd interviews, he really dislikes the music business.
Yeah.
A lot.
It's well recorded, and he's very well aware of it.
And I've learned a lot about the music business because of Todd.
Mm-hmm.
If the things he say are true, which I guarantee you they are, because you can definitely tell there's no filter with Todd for sure. Then he goes into like music on computers, which we talked about with the last interview about how he's getting into computers and everything, the CDI, laser discs, all that kind of stuff. And then the one thing he brought up, he goes, in 5 years, which would be 1996 from this interview, TVs and computers will merge to create interactive TV, which I feel like, I don't know if it happened in 1996.
Sure, but it eventually happened, you know,
But it
in some way, shape, or form. Zack pointed out when we were talking about this yesterday, he's like, I don't know if that's really happening. And I go, well, technically, like, it kind of has happened with streaming services. Not so much in the storybook fashion of a television show, but it definitely has happened where we have some kind of interactivity with how we watch things. And that's brought on by the internet and television and the way that we consume media, or even YouTube, you know. But so that was my takeaway from that. It just didn't happen in 1996 so much as 2006. So
yeah, and he, you know, like leading up on this, he goes like, if this were to happen, artists won't know what to do because they're so tied up in the music biz. You know, put out a record and it's just pop garbage and it's about love and that's bullshit.
And that's where we were talking about this whole Todd's a Renaissance man. You know, he can do many different things. But even in 1991, compared to the last interview in 1995, he's still talking about renewing himself as an artist. And I'm sure that watching people become complacent to it is what keeps him alive and keeps him going with it. So that's Todd, man. So anyway,
that's why we love him.
And Todd, the interviewer Ken Owens, he asked Todd about, you know, how he feels about being. I think this is so funny. Even when I posted this last month for you to watch, I thought it stood out when the guy's like, well, what do you think about your contemporaries like Elton John and Rod Stewart? And I go, oh, really? Wow. I never really think about it like that. Because I guess people would just class it under the classic rock category. And I suppose Elton John and Rod Stewart, who are both English, fall in the same category as classic rock as Todd Rundgren. And I don't think about it that way. I thought it was very interesting that that Ken Owens interviewer asked that question and pointed it out.
I also liked this interviewer, I think, because he is a Todd fan.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not like some guy's just like, oh, so Todd, what are you thinking about right now? Yeah. Like, this guy knows Todd.
Yeah, and he, again, this interview was during the Second Wind tour. Apparently, this is just contextual, was on a radio station like a month ago, and he played Change Myself off of Second Wind. And he goes, Todd, what do you think about these radio stations not giving you the time, even though songs like Parallel Lines and Change Myself are quote unquote radio ready? And he goes, that's just the music business. You know, sometimes you win it, sometimes you don't. So, which Parallel Lines and Change Myself, I guess those are the most radio friendly songs on that release. Everything else, you know, I don't think they're going to be playing The Smell of Money on your local radio station in 1991. But
yeah. Also, Ken made a good Tepte reference, and he called it as Tepte, which I was like, oh man, this guy knows.
Whoa, I missed that.
Yeah. And he talks about the quote that Todd says. He goes, a lot of people sell a lot of records more than me, but they're not making records anymore. And that kind of goes back to the Rod. Well, not really. No, Rod and Elton still make records. Well,
yeah, man, I listen to the Rod Stewart Christmas every year.
Yeah, dude, Rod's the man.
But
those first couple records are pretty good.
I mean, the guy puts out a Christmas album every year. I still listen.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I thought that was very interesting that he included them, and I don't know. I just don't consider it like that.
Yeah, I think like, a lot of these guys they're from that early 70s, and that's like when, like, I feel like at that point music was like getting huge with like radio and records and everything, which all that stuff was going on in the 50s and the 60s too. But I think in the 70s that was like getting like, it was just everywhere.
Well, yeah, and especially August. This interview is dated August 25th, 1991. That's 3 weeks before the music industry changed forever with grunge. I think it's eventually pretty interesting because, especially at this point in music, everything had just started to become a little too stale for a lot of people, and so that's why the impact. If you don't know what I'm referring to, I'm talking about how "Smells Like Teen Spirit" first went on the air like 3 weeks after this. I think it's like mid-September of 1991, and that changed the landscape for the next decade of music. Obviously, if you don't know that, I'm sure you were there. We were not, so that's interesting. And then also he talks about a whole period of renewal. I don't know if I'm jumping around here too much, Zach, but he kind of hints at Utopia getting back together, and they did eventually get back together in '92, and a few other projects were happening along the way that probably just didn't work out. He was talking about doing another opera, but apparently that didn't flesh out. He was talking about how that was one of his things he was trying to get up off the ground.
It's like Shakespeare Festival.
That's what it was. Yeah, Shakespeare Festival.
And the Utopia stuff, they were talking about how like they were getting back. This is obviously they got back together in '92, like you said. They stopped because it started being a point where they were doing it for money.
I see.
Because Utopia was created to become a musical adventure.
Exactly.
I think, like at first, like Todd said, like, the first Utopia, he wanted to start playing guitar again. He wanted to start shredding, like just playing these crazy riffs, soloing, making these long, elaborated songs. Obviously, that's well represented in the first Utopia album. But then, like towards the late '80s, it was just kind of like becoming like a job. And I think that's really important with like music, because like my guitar teacher growing up would always say, Jimmy Aschenbrenner, shout out to him, if it becomes a job, then stop. It's not worth it. It'll ruin it. It will ruin, music will be ruined forever if it becomes a job, more than just a passion or a hobby or fun or whatever you want to call it. And that's, I think Utopia was more like a passion kind of thing, and it became too commercial, and then the guys were like, nah, we're done. I'm assuming it's probably more the other three guys probably needed money, and Todd was probably cool.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that with Alkaline Trio.
Yeah.
Like Zack and I are Alkaline Trio fans. If you've never heard of Alkaline Trio, that's fine. But anyway, Matt Skiba is the lead vocalist of the band, and I had it under good authority that he was doing fine financially. He had his money together, but the other two guys didn't. So they wanted to do a lot of the Past Lives tour, which is essentially just like a greatest hits, but extended. And he didn't want to keep doing that. He wanted to make new music, but because they were making so much money doing something that started off like a labor of love, such as the Past Lives tour, which was just playing all of their albums all the way through over 3 nights. Then it became, we could do it in this city. We could do it in this city and make this much. We could do it in this city and make this much, and which seemed a lot more easier than actually going on tour and putting out new music and stuff like that. So I kind of liken it to that experience that probably Todd had. Not to poo-poo anybody, but because I'm sure everybody was having fun. But Todd is all about the renewal, and it shows. He's a Renaissance man. Yeah. He's ready for the next thing.
No one like him.
Exactly. He has a very unique character. And we like doing these interview episodes because as people who love Todd, if I could speak for Zack, it's really cool to find these like nuggets of information. Like, what was the other thing you were talking about yesterday, Zack, during this interview? He talks about some cat from Japan. What was his name?
There's a guy named Hiroshi Takano.
That's what it was, yeah.
The Japanese artist, and he still makes music, and I've listened to a lot of his stuff. Was introduced because I know Todd worked with him. He does have a cover of Can We Still Be Friends?
Oh, wow.
I think I saw the light, one of the big Todd hit songs. And the 2 albums that Todd produced are not easy to find. They're streaming.
They're
I think
not.
the
They're not in
cheapest
streaming. You said.
no.
So yeah.
But yeah, check him out. He's cool. That was it. Ken was bringing up how he bought the CD.
Mm-hmm.
This is 1991.
Oh yeah. And he said that
And
he
goes,
imported it.
He imported it. It was $30.
Yeah.
Which is funny because that's like the same price now. Where I feel like things in 91, that's almost 30 years ago. If it's $30 back then, now it would be 60 or 80 or 90 or whatever. I've looked up the CD of the one that Todd produced, and I think I saw it online, eBay or something. It was, I think, around $30, maybe with a few bucks shipping.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. I really appreciated how Ken he's like a fanboy, but like he was like little stuff like that. Like he knew what he was talking about. He wasn't just cheesy radio station asking Todd about his new album and what he's doing on tour, which is good, which is fine. Like I like hearing it, but like this interview was very genuine and it wasn't awkward, and he was able to carry himself very well, because I think a good interview is very important based on the interviewee, like the interviewer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
you know
absolutely.
what I mean? Like if like obviously the person that's being interviewed will say what they want, but if the person who's asking the question and how to follow up and interact with them makes the interview a lot more interesting and substantial.
Absolutely.
Another thing I wanted to say about this interview is Todd talks major shit on heavy metal. Mostly like the hair metal.
Yeah, well, that's and that goes with the whole musical renaissance that was on the cusp of happening 3 weeks from this date.
It was really funny. He says he's talking major shit.
Everybody was sick of it and had to die. Even Todd Rundgren was sick of
it. They look like their mothers. They didn't know how to play their instruments. It took them like 2 years to record an album, and he's like, I can record an album in 2 days. I mean, like, you have to write obviously beforehand, but like it was really funny. And like, I mean, I'm not a fan of hair metal. It's probably my least favorite genre.
That's right, Zack does hate it. Yeah, it's fine. I don't like hair metal either, but I like a lot of the production that's around hair metal for the most part. When it was interesting, and then before it became stale. I'm just glad that I wasn't around for it. That's all. Let the record show that I only like Motley Crue's "Kickstart Your Heart" because of the video where Sam Kinison is at the beginning and he drops them off at the Whiskey A Go Go. That's the only reason why I like that song, because he's like, yeah. It's so sick, but it's very minute. So, all right, man. Anything you want to add to that August 25th, 1991 interview?
The one thing we didn't talk about, we can bring up before we go, is that Ken asked Todd about when he's writing the spiritual turn in his music.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, not necessarily like religious, but like, what does it mean? Like if you listen to like Nearly Human and Second Wind, there feels like some sort of spiritual.
Yeah, and even the guy in the ever popular Torture Artist Effect movie, the Tepte movie, asks him the similar question, if you remember that. We'll talk about that episode or that movie in another episode. But do you remember that, right? So I think that's a very interesting question that multiple interviewers have asked him.
Yeah, I mean, Todd's like with the whole that question, his like rebuttal to that, answering what that means, because obviously we all think he is going to a spiritual movement. He goes, I've always moving in my songwriting. He started off with love affairs, talking about love or breaking up or that kind of shit. But he feels like the ground has been plowed and there's nothing left to say. And he's looking for more underlining causes to talk about. I think that's where the spiritual, like your subconscious, like things that you think about in life, like, should I do this? Should I do that? And that's, I think, what becomes spiritual to us to think about what he's talking about, if that makes any sense. Establishing like what we think, what our life should be, or what we should do, or what we should do going forward. And I think that is kind of spiritual. And he kind of checked the boxes on it. One last thing, and that's everything else in my notes that we didn't bring up, is that when he was talking about the virtual TV kind of stuff, he wants people to be floating around in a fish tank, looking at everything and listening.
Now, what do you suppose that Todd Rundgren is implying when he says that? It's a very, even when you pointed it out to me yesterday, I was like, I was like, what an odd thing to say, or a way to put how you want people to experience.
I kind of like that though.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a psychedelic kind of guy personally.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I understand the metaphor he's going for, just like floating around, like experience being very cool.
Mm-hmm.
He also was on that Adult Swim show. Have you ever seen that? The
What?
fish show?
No.
There's a show where it's like a band comes on and there's like a fish tank
What?
and people play and they like interview them and stuff. It's like really bizarre.
No. Wait, are you talking about Space Ghost Coast to Coast?
No.
Are you talking about Squidbillies?
No.
I don't know what you're talking about then.
This is called...
So I'm talking about these Todd nuggets, man. So many of them.
It's from a few years ago. Fish Center. It's an hour long. Like Los Lobos was on there. It's a whole series.
Huh.
And it's
What's
just
called
like
Fish Center.
It's just like a fish tank, and it's like fishes, and then he talks, and then he plays, and then you can call in.
Interesting. Yeah, I never knew that. I'll have to check it out. And I suggest everybody else listening checks it out.
Yeah, it's an hour long. It's good. I've watched it a few times. Yeah, Todd's done a lot of work with Adult Swim. He did the music for Squidbillies, and
I knew he worked with Squidbillies. Yeah, that's why I was curious.
Yeah, they're playing in a fish tank right now, and it's Chasm on bass, Prairie on electric drum set. Todd's just singing and Jesse's playing.
Is that on YouTube for the people?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Post it.
If you type in,
post it in the channel. Post it in the channel. There you go. Oh, I have seen this before. This wasn't terribly long ago.
Yeah, 3 years ago.
Yeah. This was a White Knight tour.
Yep.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I really enjoyed the Ken Owens interview.
Both these interviews are very good, and I'd like to continue doing reflections of just random things because he's got a lot to say and interesting to hear and dissect what someone that we look up to and idolize.
And it's all about those Todd nuggets. I'm just going to go on record for you and for the people that I want White Knight 2. I wish Todd would put it out.
Especially right now. He should just drop it right now.
Just drop it right now, baby. Just drop it like a tot. I have not listened to Godiva Girl or those other songs that Zack has heard.
Yeah, there's 3 tracks. He did a Sirius XM podcast, radio show kind of thing. And he talked about, he was interviewed, and then he would be like, and then he would play songs, and he played songs that he picked, and then he played some of his new songs. So they're floating out there.
Zack sent them to me once.
There's 3 of them.
And I said,
there's a Godiva Girl, and then there's one, something with a sail, a ship or something. It's the guy from Weezer's in it. Rivers Cuomo.
Yeah.
And then there's a song with the Roots.
Very cool.
And there's a song with, I can't remember the other guy, but it's somebody you guys all know.
Yep. So I was going to say that. All right. Anything else you want to say to the people there, Zack?
No, not really. I mean, if there's any interviews that you would like us to talk about, send them to us. And we
toddcastcleveland at gmail.com.
Yep.
So cool. All right.
And yeah, just want to thank you guys if you're listening. We're on Spotify and YouTube.
Woohoo.
I feel like that reaches out.
I feel like people know how to use both of those. So,
those are both pretty popular. I feel like that's what I use. So
cool. Well, thanks for listening. Again, I'm James Barney, the Toddcast Cleveland.
Thanks, guys. This is Zack signing out.